Hey, thanks for joining in to Talk Back. It is the time when Christy and I, Reverend Christy Dillon and I, take the questions that you have that were generated during the message and worship on Sunday. So thanks for submitting your questions. We have Brad with us, and he's going to share with us what those are.
All right. The first question we have is, I'm an overthinker. What are some of the ways you can break yourself out of the cycle of thinking the worst in every scenario?
That sounds like something I would write.
Me too.
So do you have an answer?
Actually, I do. So I read this book called The Untethered Soul. It is, lots of people have raved about the book. I did it in a small group, and the principles behind it are really good. So I would invite you just to Google Principles of Untethered Soul and look at those. The book for my small group really got redundant. But the bottom line is, when you start thinking something, the catch is to catch it and then consciously think, I need to stop thinking this right now. And then think about what reality really is. So one of the things that I will do in my crazy, crazy brain is I can convince myself in probably 30 seconds max, usually more like 1 second, that the church has imploded and that nobody likes me. Nobody wants my, not that it's about liking me, but not like, isn't responding to my preaching. I'm not effective. All those things. So I can convince myself that if we ever reopen, no one other than the people we pay is going to still be there. And honestly, the longer that COVID has happened, the more that fear seems to resonate within myself. So, and then like if somebody's upset with a decision that I've made, or like around the plantation issue, that was a lot controversial. I found myself really having some negative thoughts about my leadership, and Wes needs a new preacher and lots of things. And so I tried to do the principles that I've read and been taught, which is to acknowledge that you're thinking negatively. Acknowledge that there is fear. Acknowledge whatever emotion you're feeling. So I think we've been taught to suppress our emotions. Okay. And then if we do that, if we suppress our fear, our anger, our shame, then they just fester inside of us and end up getting us into more trouble. So acknowledge that we're thinking negatively. Acknowledge the feelings that are driving the thinking. And then be willing to stop thinking that, and then think about what truth is. So like for me, I'll say, okay, how many people are upset? So I'll count truly, so okay, maybe 20 to 25 people are really disappointed in my decision around the plantation. Okay, that's not a whole church. That's not 450 people. And then there were some positive, that said, hey, we're really proud of our church for standing up and taking a stance. And so I think through that, and okay, there's, 25 or 30 positives. And so we can stop that negative spiral if we look at reality. And then I find it helpful to talk to a friend. My friends have carte blanche with me to say, you got to stop. They use a bad word with me, stop that. Yeah. But I have to stop thinking that way. Y'all can beep that out if you want to, but it's true.
Well, and I'm just going to remind you, I remember on like the very first, or maybe it was the second Sunday that West was ever a thing, and you had the same fear, you're like,
it's
oh my God, are people
fear.
coming back? And here we are. So, you can think about that. We've done this for 10 years. People still love you. But I remember standing on the stage and like behind the curtain, and you were making some comment about that. And I was singing at the time, and I remember I was like, because we messed up. That we weren't great,
Oh,
and I looked
do
at you and I was
that.
honey, they're coming to hear you, not us. Remember?
I do.
So, but I totally understand that. And somebody in your position, especially with the COVID thing going on and not seeing people and connecting with people, that is a very real place for you to go to. I totally get that.
What do you do when you find yourself with negative thoughts?
Kind of what you just said, like acknowledging that you do that. Some of the things that I've learned in therapy, about changing your mindset and trying to get your mind, because I do that too, like overthink, and then I automatically go to like worst case scenario. You know, like if Adam and I have an argument, like in my brain we're divorced. You know, and he's like, that's so, you know, and he'll like laugh at me, you know, but like I have to realize, okay, I know I do this, and I know that I go to the worst place, and I don't know if it's because I want to try to prepare myself for the bad things
that is
that
a
could
thing.
happen.
Yeah, that's a real thing.
I do like that whole reality part. I need to be prepared for like all of these things. So I guess in a way you could use that as a good thing. And
well, that's
try to
that
get
Whoop
yourself,
thing. The obstacles,
Right.
They want you to envision the obstacles so that you develop a plan to overcome them. So like Michael Phelps, I meant to share this in the message, but I forgot it. Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian ever, 28 medals. When he was in Beijing, I believe, he was set to do the butterfly, and he already held the world record in it. And he dove in, and immediately upon diving in, his goggles started to leak. And they just increased taking in water. And if he stopped, you know, he would be disqualified. And there was nothing to do other than swim with the water going in the goggles. And Dr. Santos actually had this in her podcast, The Happiness Lab. And Phelps, when he was asked about it by his coach, he's like, what did you do? And he said, well, I just swam blind. He's like, how did you know to do that? And he said, well, I used to, when I would picture my race, you know, I picture the perfect race. He said, but I also think about the obstacles that can happen to my having the perfect race. And so one of the things that Phelps taught himself to do was count his strokes. And so because he had thought, what if I ever had to swim blind? You know, what if that was an obstacle? What if I couldn't see the wall? And so he knew exactly how many strokes it was going to take for him to get from one side of the pool to the other. So I do think going to the worst place is a natural human tendency and can be used for good if we use it to let us think of a plan to overcome the obstacles. But it's not good if we choose to go and stay there and think, okay, the worst is going to happen, instead of just, oh, that's one thing that could happen. How can I overcome it? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Like if I have a plan, then I feel better.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's part of Santos's teachings.
So I
you
feel
know,
like saying
have
that
a plan,
like acknowledging that happens, and think of a plan maybe that might help you through it. And then, for me, like you were talking about earlier, you have to get back to gratitude, because gratitude always will bring you back to joy.
Gratitude always wins. That's
it does.
I think the third sermon in this series, we're going to talk about gratitude.
It's one of the first things when I start my prayer in the mornings. I usually start with gratitude, and it helps put your mind into a better place, or at least luckily so far it has for me. For the most part.
It's a deal maker. Yeah, actually.
One of the things I've been taught in my therapy sessions in recent past, what I've gone through, is when you start thinking of stuff like that, think of a blank page or a blank screen. And then that'll get you out of that thought process to then start on the path of thinking good. And I always use the big screen at the school. That was what I would picture in my mind, a big plain white screen. And then, okay, stop those negative thoughts and let's start thinking about something positive.
Yep.
All right. So we have another question. Do you have any suggestions for finding the right way to focus on things when tough in life? When things are tough in life. So I guess it's kind of going back to what we just talked about, but what are some of the things you find the right way to focus on when things are tough?
That's where I think what we fill our minds with is so important. And that's where I think faith-based music really is a game changer. So the song Love Comes First by Casting Crowns just now, it popped up on my Spotify playlist, and I listened to the words and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, you came to me. I didn't have to come to you. I mean, you were there always, no matter what. So I think filling our minds, that always comes across as like some religious mumbo jumbo, but I really think it's true. What we meditate on and what we think about defines us. So one of the things I really recommend is faith-based music.
And I would add to that something, kind of like, I think this was in your scripture this morning, when I think it's Paul that says, my grace is sufficient for you. Like, we talked about that a lot in seminary, like when my friends and I, when we would get really stressed out over a test or whatever was happening in the church we were working in, or whatever it was, we would talk about that and how that can kind of stop you in your tracks and think about just the grace that we're given is sufficient for everything. So sometimes I think that can like stop those thoughts that are taking over, or that are really causing us to think the worst of what can happen. Though some, like we said, some of us like to be prepared for the worst, but I feel like if we, like the music or something like that, or some mantra maybe that you say, like that little boy
the
on that
video in Amped.
Because I had seen that before somewhere else this past week or two, and I try to remind myself to say things like that, like I am loved, and I am brave, I am strong, I can do this, that kind of thing. I think those types of thoughts and words can help us, or at least help pull us out of that so we can get to somewhere better.
Okay, this is a good question here, although I don't know if we can do much with COVID going on, but are there things like retail therapy, travel, etc., good distractions to put you in happiness, or does that postpone dealing with the emotions?
I was thinking about that a little bit while we were listening to what you were saying. Sometimes the little things that make you happy, it might not be a big game changer, but maybe getting a pair of shoes that you've wanted for a while, maybe that'll like cheer you up for that day. But I don't know that that's gonna it's definitely not gonna like carry you through the rest of your life or through your relationships or whatever. But little things like that, like having an extra, going to Starbucks if you don't normally go to Starbucks and get yourself like a little treat like that. Or does that make sense? Like the little things that.
Scott and I dissolved our marriage and owned that together, that, we just had reached a place that we weren't happy together. And so I think he would be okay with my saying that I chased happiness for a long time with fancy vacations. And I wouldn't go on vacation unless it was on an airplane, and most of the time outside the continental United States. And I always made the excuse that I couldn't unplug from work, if I didn't go far away. So like Aruba or on a cruise or whatever. I always made that excuse. And what he and I owned corporately is that we just could not, sadly, be happy together. And I used to try to fill my happiness, and this is very transparent and vulnerable for me, but I used to try to fill my happiness with fancy vacations, retail therapy, and I agree with what you're saying, small things, little treats. But I think if you start doing that a lot, it's really dangerous. And I put us in debt for a little while because I didn't follow a budget, and I would always be looking for new clothes or whatever. Going to Uganda changed that for me, and I was grateful. I stopped shopping and a lot like that 10 years ago, the excessive shopping. I still love my clothes and will always love clothes and my shoes.
Me too.
But, I did. I would, on my day off, instead of being alone with my thoughts, I would be at the mall or TJ Maxx or Target, and it's just not a good thing. So it does, whoever wrote that question, it does postpone having to deal with the stuff. So I think
Definitely.
treats are okay, but if you're banking it all on that one big vacation
Yeah.
or something, it's not sustainable.
No, and you can get like pulled into just focusing on that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I have learned since all my life has changed that happiness and joy comes in small things. So now my Sundays off are not spent out of the country. They're spent doing things I would have never imagined would make me happy, but they bring me the most joy.
that makes sense.
Okay. Here's one that's kind of complex. From Paul Thorn's example, can you comment on suffering and not necessarily happy suffering brings us to the point of sole reliance on the Lord for his strength and his definition of happiness?
So, sorry to
Wow.
keep talking. These are things that I can relate to very
Okay.
recently.
That's okay.
So the whole suffering thing. When I realized that my marriage was ending almost a couple of years ago, there were some really dark moments. And there was a really dark period about 5 to 6 years before my marriage dissolved. And I'll never forget Faye Carrasca, who used to be our minister, our pastoral care catalyst. There was one night, and it just was one of the darkest nights our family had faced. And I had nothing left. And I was empty. And I knew I was empty. The kids were struggling. Scott was struggling. And I felt like there was no hope. And I didn't want to get up in the mornings, and I reached out to Faye and I said, I just need you to pray for me. I feel like I've lost hope. And she did. All this was in text. Text is a powerful thing. But for like a month, I think she would text me every day that she was praying for me. And somehow, we made it through that and made it through stuff to come to all four of us now are at very solid, happy places. And we respect each other for that. But sometimes you have to be empty and rely on that my grace is sufficient for you. And sometimes we don't really rely on that grace until we're empty.
I have a similar story. I remember a few years ago with some family things going on with us, and it was like an afternoon, and I was laying in bed because I was, depressed, hopeless, just I don't even know what to do, and two people texted me, and it changed how I was feeling, and one of them was Amy, and just checking in. And Pat Benfield.
Oh wow.
She texted me too, and it really made a difference in how I was feeling. It kind of helped me be able to get up and move on. But like you said, like a text can be really powerful.
And I think those are nudges. We don't know
I do
how
too.
God works and the mysterious energy in the universe and all that kind of stuff. But when you get that nudge to text somebody, or to call them or reach out to them.
There's a reason.
There's a reason, so follow it. If something says to you, don't put it off because you're too busy or something. It really makes a world of difference.
It's because you don't know what people are going through.
Right, you never do.
They didn't know I was laying in my bed crying.
Right.
On a Friday at 5:00.
Have you told them? Have you told them that text changed you?
I don't think so.
You should.
I don't think I have.
I would reach out to them. I think knowing that we make a difference in people's lives really helps us. And I know Pat would love to hear that.
Yeah, I know your husband did it to me on a unfortunate date that pops up every year. He did the same thing. He just felt it, and he said, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I received it, and it meant the world to me. And I told him the other night when we were recording, and I said, thank you for that. So it is. Text messages just pop in your box, and they do pick you up
And it takes, what, 30 seconds?
Yeah, it's not a
Well,
lot.
and Adam does that a lot. Like he'll tell me, he'll say, you know what, I've been thinking about Brad today, and I really need to like text him or Andre or whoever.
Yeah.
So definitely pay attention.
Yeah, Adam
to
does
those.
that so well.
Yes, he does.
He has pulled me out of many a miry pit.
Yes, he does. Thanks, bud. All right, the last one, and this is kind of political, but
Oh, good.
seems the political situation and election are multiplying the worries and anxieties of the pandemic for me. How do I separate it out? Is that possible?
I've quit watching the news.
Amen.
I really have. I am doing my research on the candidates in a very logical manner, and I'm not approaching anything with my mind already made up. So, like, I read an article in the New York Times this morning about the coronavirus, and numbers were actually decreasing in lots of places, and the number of tests were less, and it was so many good things. And they made it sound, and I like the New York Times. I don't know if it's liberal or conservative, and don't write me about that. I don't care. It just shows up in my inbox, and so I'm like, okay, I'll read it.
I get the same thing.
And I was like, you have taken something that could have been positive and made it so negative. Like, they just made it negative. I was so frustrated. And so I think really right now we do have to separate that. And if we watch the news and listen to the media a lot, we are going to be infiltrated with negativity. It just seems to be so negative right now. And so I just, I don't know if you're disappointed in me as your pastor for not being into the news, but when COVID started, I had to because there was enough other stuff to worry about. Yeah. I didn't need all that. So I do seek out news. I'm not like under a shell, but I don't do it like in a routine kind of way.
You have to be careful who you listen to and how much you're listening or taking in.
And we'd be prudent to listen to all sides.
Absolutely.
Very
Fox
much so.
and CNN,
Yes.
MSN,
and the
listen
fact
to
that,
them all, not just one.
And the fact that everybody has an opinion about a virus, like, I'm very careful. Like, I always listen to Dr. Fauci. Like, I love him. And, like, pick maybe a couple other news organizations that you'll read or listen to, and then make that it, because just listening to people talking about going back to school and all the bad things that can happen, I read too much of it, or I let it soak into me to where I became paralyzed, just completely paralyzed, and I had to take leave of absence for a few weeks because I was so terrified about going back to school, and I love doing what I do. I love my kids, and I love my school, and I love the people I work with. And so all I did was cry because I was afraid, but I wanted to be back to normal, like I wanted to go back and see my kids and blah, blah, blah. And I was just spinning in circles. And, thank God for FMLA and having hours that I can take and good doctors and a supportive husband. I'm okay now, but I read way too much stuff. Like, I can't. I have to.
Social media. I just am trying to stay off of social media. There is nothing beneficial about Facebook with all the political posts. I am addicted to TikTok and watching recipes and people dance. So
and
animals.
Animal
I don't
videos.
get the animals in my TikTok
Okay.
videos. I don't know why. But seriously,
I'll send you some.
Thank you. I think we need to understand too that everybody has a right to their opinion.
Sure.
And
Yes.
we need to quit judging each other for each other's opinions. One of the things I respect about our staff is we're not all in the same political place, and we make each other better because of that. When I hear the opposing opinion, I learn something. And we just are so angry right now. We don't want to hear and learn from each other, and that is so sad. So I think we need to go through the next 3 months with attitudes of openness and respect instead of being so defensive and angry.
I agree completely. that wraps it up for this week,
All
ladies.
right. Thank y'all for joining
Thank
in.
you.